Hello guys and welcome back to Shaun's Japanese course, yes. And in this video we're going to talk about verbs, yeah. So in the previous video we talked about the basic sentence structure and I mentioned just how powerful verbs really are. So in this video I wanted to explore verbs a little bit, right? Explain them. Because in the Japanese language, verbs are actually very simple and their conjugations are also actually very simple, right? I mean, when I first, studied this, right? When I first learned this and when I first, saw just how simple the conjugations were and just how, the groupings of the verbs worked, right? Like the irregular verbs and the irregular verbs and stuff like that. And just everything was just amazing. I mean, like, if you look at something like French or German, right? Or even English for that matter, right? The verbs can be nightmarish, okay? Especially irregular verbs, right? But in here, it's just amazing. And instead of me, just talking about this, because I could talk about this for weeks, let me just show you just how amazing this is, okay? So, in the Japanese language, okay, we have three types of verbs, okay? We have ru verbs, right? U verbs, right? And of course, we have irregular verbs, okay? Now, of course, ru verbs and u verbs are two types of irregular verbs, right? However, as far as irregular verbs go, well, we only have two. Like, isn't that amazing? We only have two, and I don't mean like two types of irregular verbs, I mean two irregular verbs, and that's it. We have kuru, as in to come, and suru, to do. And those are all of the irregular verbs. Isn't that just amazing, right? I mean, that's awesome, isn't it? I mean, how awesome is that? We only have two irregular verbs, guys. Only two of them, okay? It's just two. I mean, that's amazing, okay? Okay, but anyway, I knew this lesson is gonna be like this, but anyway, let's move forward, right? So as I said, we have ru verbs, u verbs, and two irregular verbs, kuru and suru, to come and to do. Of course, irregular verbs aside, okay, let's calm down, okay? Calm down, Shaun, deep breaths, So yeah, irregular verbs aside, the two types of regular verbs, the ru verbs and the u verbs, right, are called now speaking English for a prolonged period of time really grates my throat, okay? The sounds of the English language are really hard for me to actually reproduce, right? Because they're really harsh, right? And the longer I actually speak, it's actually harder for me to reproduce them, okay? So I do apologize for that. I will try to be better, right? So, okay, whining aside, ru verbs, right, are called like that because they end in this ru, right? The hiragana ru. U verbs, on the other hand, can have actually multiple different endings, but they all end in u, okay? So, u verbs can end in 9 types of endings, okay? And that's actually very important because of conjugations later on. But for the time being, right, we have ku, gu, su, tsu, nu, bu, mu, ru, and of course, u. However, this final u, right, it actually comes from this like a vu sound, okay? And that's actually important to remember because the v conjugation is because the v is going to be important for conjugations later on, okay? However, it's still u, okay? It's just that we have this silent v, okay? So just remember that, okay? Now, the issue, however, isn't in the fact that this ends with u, but in the fact that we have this ru as an ending for the u verbs. And we also have the ru as an ending for the ru verbs, right? So that can actually cause a little bit of confusion. But worry not, the linguists, right, the language teachers have you covered, okay? They have discovered this little pattern, right, that shows the difference between ru verbs and u verbs. And what that actually pattern is, right, what this amazing definition actually is that if the verb ends in eru or iru, it will probably be a ru verb. Now, this probably, it should fire off some red lights in your head, okay? It's actually a bit of an issue, okay? Now, of course, I did say that if it ends in eru or iru, it will probably be a ru verb, but it also means that it can be an u verb as well, However, the important bit to get out of this, definition, quote-unquote, is that if a verb does not end in eru or iru, it's definitely an u verb, okay? So as long as the verb ends in eru or iru, it could be a ru verb, but if it's not an eru eru, eriru, and then it's a new verb, no problem, right? So that's actually the good bit of this sentence. Now, of course, that can actually be a little bit of an issue, especially if you're a beginner and you're not used to these verbs, right? You don't know, how they conjugate, or you're just not experienced enough with them, right? And sometimes differentiating them can actually be an issue, and we can see the reason behind it in examples. So, for instance, kaku, as in to write, right, ends in ku, so it's an u verb, right? Yomu ends in mu, okay? So it's an u verb as well, right? It does not end in eru or iru, right? Taberu ends in ru, or rather ends in eru, right? So it's a ru verb. Miru, miru ends in iru, right? Miru ends in iru, so it's a ru verb. However, I did mention that it will probably be a ru verb if it ends in eru or iru, so we can also have something like this. Hairu, as in to go in or to enter, right? It ends in iru, but it's an u verb, okay? So, see? And, of course, we have something like this. Keru, as in to kick, right? Like with your foot, right? With your leg, actually. But the point is that it ends in eru, but it's an u verb as well. So, yeah, that can actually be a bit of an issue, right? However, even more of an issue is something like this. Iru, as in to exist. Now, of course, iru is to exist for living things, right? For people and animals, okay? It ends in iru, I mean the entire verb is iru, obviously, and it's a ru verb. However, we also have this verb. Iru, yeah, to want or to need, yeah. It ends in iru, right? The entire verb is iru, but it's an u verb. And here is the actual issue, okay? Here is the actual problem, because we have these two little verbs that are basically the same. Well, they look the same anyway, and yet they are two different types of verbs. Now, of course, with experience, it's going to be easier, right? Because these two little verbs, right, they do sound a little bit different, right? And you will be, used to using them, right? So you will know how they look in the masu form and stuff like that, the polite form. So you will be able to differentiate between them, right? But as a beginner, it can be a bit confusing, okay? However, the reason why I mention this isn't to confuse you, right? Or nor to scare you, okay? The reason why I mention this is basically because I have to, okay? At the end of the day, none of this really matters, okay? And here is why. If you learn the verb, right? If you hear it, right? Because you expose yourself to the language, right? You watched a movie or a music video, right? Or an anime, right? And you picked up a verb, right? And you learned a new verb, right? You looked it up in the dictionary and you know what it means. However, when you look it up in the dictionary and you know what it means, just look up its masu form. That's basically it, right? The polite form. You see, in Japanese, you will be using the polite form a lot, okay? However, in the polite form, it's actually very easy to differentiate between ru verbs and u verbs. So you will always know which verb is, which, as long as you know the masu form. So, how that actually looks is that we have these two little verbs. Kaeru, as in to change. Well, kaeru, as in to change. It's a ru verb, right? It ends in eru. And we have this little verb. Kaeru, as in to go back or to return, right? It ends in eru, but it's a new verb, right? Now, of course, in hiragana they look the same, right? If you write them out in hiragana, they will look the same, right? In their, plain form. However, change them into the masu form, and all of a sudden, kaeru, to change, changes into kaemasu in the polite form. And the kaeru, to go back, changes into the kaerimasu, in the polite form. So they look different in the polite form. In fact, they're quite different in the polite form. And as a result, and since you're gonna be using the polite form anyway, it's actually very helpful to look up the polite form of a verb once you learn a new verb. So what I'm trying to say here isn't that that you should just go to a dictionary and just look up every single verb and their polite form. No, of course not. That's stupid, okay? I would never advocate something like that, okay? That's just insane, okay? Blind memorization is just stupid, okay? When it comes down to language study, okay? However, what I'm trying to get at here is that once you learn a new verb, right? Once you hear a new verb, it's very helpful as a beginner to just, check up its masu form, right? And, once you learn the new verb, you learn the masu form as well. And, simply by seeing the masu form, you will know whether it's a Euro verb or an U verb, right? It's not going to be an issue for you, right? So you're going to be able to conjugate it properly in other forms as well. Now, all of this aside though, at the end of the day, this does not really matter all that much. Now, of course, I'm going to cover the basic forms and how they conjugate in the following videos, right? So you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to talk about the muscle form as well, so you're not going to have to worry about that either. However, what I'm trying to get at here is that you don't really have to stress about any of this, okay? It's actually very simple once you get used to it, okay? And as far as the root verbs and verbs go and, how you're going to differentiate them, you're just going to, improve with experience, okay? It's not going to be that much of an issue for you, okay? It's not that hard, okay? It seems a bit complicated, but it's not, okay? The thing that I want you guys to get out of this video, right? Relax, okay? Just keep calm and listen to Shaun, okay? Because you have Shaun on your side, okay? I am here, okay? And you do not have to worry about anything, okay? So, what I want you guys to get out of this video is that we have root verbs and U verbs, right? Two types of regular verbs. And that we only have two irregular verbs, right? Kuru and suru, to come and to do. So, that's basically it, okay? That's all you have to, remember out of this video, okay? That's the important part of this video, okay? So, in the following video, I'm actually gonna start talking about the verb conjugations, and you're gonna see just how easy and simple these verb conjugations actually are, okay? Now, the important bit to actually remember here is that in Japanese, we only have two tenses, okay? The present and the past. Well, the present tense is also known as the non-past tense, right? Because it represents both the present and the future, right? It's this, for instance, this taberu, right? Or kuru or suru, right? They're all in the present tense, right? However, verbs conjugate in the Japanese language in these forms, right? As I said, the negative form, the polite form, the te form later on, and so on and so forth, right? And even the past tense in and of itself is just the past form, right? So, starting with the next video, I'm actually going to cover some of these forms. And I hope I'll see you in that one. Bye.